in contemporary music, always there used to be these words which are like a slang words, I think, and then symphony for really contemporary composers sometimes is like a slang. What symphony? It's so is a name which belongs to, I don't know, the Mahler maybe was the last, or okay. I think I'm not shy about these names anymore, and I'm not shy about anything I'm doing anymore, and I'm not worrying about am I contemporary, I am not contemporary. It's not important for me anymore.
Mm-hmm. Laipni lūgts programma Viena balsi. Today we are very glad to receive Andris Dzenītis. Welcome, Andris.
Hello.
Andris is a Latvian composer, is also a music critic, and you had a radio program that you quit a couple of years ago.
And I'm also teacher.
And you also teaching music. So precisely, my first question would be, what are your activities, if you want to introduce yourself, and for people who don't know your work, what has been your first education and all the process that helped you become a composer, the key moments, the meetings?
Yeah, basically I think all my life is somehow around the music, but maybe it's too risky to say like this, because I have also my personal life.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, composing is the main subject of my life, and I'm trying to have as much time as possible for composing, but I'm not so famous composer in a global terms that I cannot afford to be just composer. So I'm basically spending my days in different schools, teaching the same composition, and also some quite interesting other subjects which are not just solfeggio or harmony, but more related with the history of contemporary music, with orchestration, with the physics of sound and so on, and it's also a very interesting process for me. You told about this critic side of me. I must say that I'm trying to avoid this activity in the last years, because when you are living in a quite small country where everybody knows everybody, then it's quite risky to be too critical. So I'm keeping this critical side more or less for my friends, for our closed circle to talk about, but not publicly. So but anyway, I'm trying to be also more open for different sides of art. That's because I'm also stopping to be so critical about everything. So I'm trying more to understand what's in and what's so. But my background, yes, I remember music in my life as long as I can remember myself. So maybe it was quite a natural process, because my sister was she's older than me, 9 years, and she was playing violin at home all the time. So I was in a mid of music since then, and so when I was 6, I started to attend the music school. So I don't know, but my mother thought that it was my own decision. So I just saw this building of music school, and it was a quite beautiful building in a beautiful surroundings, and I thought, oh, what's this building? It's a music school. So yeah, I want to go there. So yeah, and I started as a piano player, and quite successfully, but there was one age when I had too much interests, and basically they were not related with piano playing, and these methods of piano playing that you have to sit many hours to practice, and it was really not for me. And I always wanted to try many things and to see how it works, starting from, I don't know, from anything, from wood cutting to painting and everything. And I tried also to compose, and it started also very early. And a couple of years ago, I found my first paper sheets with my symphonies and operas I wrote when I was 7 or something like this. And it's very funny. Of course, these are not my first compositions, but at least my first wish to be a composer. So, and then my piano career was gone, and I completely switched to creative activities. And when I was, I must say, I was like 12. I composed my first avant-garde style composition, which was quite shocking for professionals. And wow, who is this small guy who is breaking piano? and it was. It was.
Why was it shocking? Because of a process?
Because the small kid is doing clusters and playing on piano strings, and just my first my first composition teacher was demonstrating me some pieces like Schnittke and Cage and something like this, which was at these years, it was like 1990s. It was quite exotic for Latvia, because as you know, we didn't had this avant-garde movement in a right time, like in 70s or 60s, and so this was something completely new and then shocking. And yes, then I continued like this, and then moved to Dārziņš school in Riga when my first, not first, but the second teacher in my life in composition was Pēteris Vasks, and so we became a good friends, and still are. And he was like father for me for this time. And what was important in these times with Vasks, that he was not a teacher for me in terms of technical skills, but more a teacher of life. So we were talking a lot about the goal, about the aim of music, what is the content of music, not technical details. And many times I didn't agree with him, so we had when I was a bit older, like 18, 19, then I was totally against him. So, but yes, it was an important period in my life, and I was really much influenced by music of Vasks, and I must say that I was in love with his music before I started to this school with him. But anyway, I love this expression, this kind of expression of emotions, what was in his earliest works, and then this level of pain, I must say, and I somehow even, I think I copied his music for some moments, or had something similar in my earliest works. And even then, when Pēteris was already not writing music like this, I continued to be so in such high pressure in music. And later I had the opportunity to spend 1 year in Vienna when I was 18. Thanks to Pēteris Vasks, I got a very good scholarship for 1 year in Austria, in the capital of old music. And what was for me very important, that it was at that time was not only capital of old but also of new music, because the most important things what I got from this year was attending festivals, concerts, and having opportunity to look into scores of famous avant-garde composers. And this was also like 1996-7. This was first years we maybe had some contemporary scores in Latvia, and we was making exchange and having this passion for every page of contemporary music. Mm-hmm. So this was very important year for me. And later I came back and was here in Latvia for 1 year, and then moved to Lithuania, where I was for 4 years, yes, and then graduated all the possible schools there. So this is my unusual way maybe of my education. So as my friend and my colleague Martins Williams, which is still in Lithuania, I'm also scholar of this tradition of Lithuanian music school. Mm-hmm. So later my professional freedom started.
So the influence of Peter Vask, you were talking about it, and what are the artists who influenced you in your musical creation? It can be indeed musicians, not only in the field of classical and contemporary music, but as I suppose you are interested by a lot of things, it can be also poets or writers or painters maybe in the artistic process.
I must say I was really very fanatic about contemporary music when I was a teenager, and I recorded almost everything what was on radio, which was after 90, and I had a huge collection of audio cassettes, I think some 300 or something like this, and I bought these empty tapes every week and spent all my money for this, and of course the half of it is already in garbage now, but I had this imagination that I will listen this music for many times. Of course, something it was good, something not good, but what was important, and what I'm telling also to my pupils in school, that you should listen to different kind of music, also for bad music in your opinion, just to understand why it's bad for you.
It's interesting, yeah.
But because it's maybe just for you it's a bad music, for others because for example I sometimes I don't get this good side of some composers which I really don't understand, which are world famous, but I still don't understand them. Yes. But it doesn't mean that it's bad music. It's maybe it's not understandable for myself. So I went through all this my collection just to understand what is for me personally important and what is not. And therefore I must say that my favorite composers changed all the time. And about these influences, at the moment, right now, I even cannot say what is influencing me now. Because it's a mix of different things, and maybe sometimes it's just one piece from one composer, a couple of pieces from other composer. maybe I'm watching one film from one movie director, the other is not for me, not so good for me. And yes, when I was, I think, like at the age until my 30s, then I was a big fan of many composers. Like there was a period of Messiaen, which was really important for me. I remember I was listening almost everything what I had opportunity to listen, and even tried to learn to play organ, to play Messiaen works. So it was important for me to play his music as well. And when I was in a school, I was Schnittke was God for me. I wrote even articles about Schnittke. I read every books about Schnittke, which was available in Russian, not in Latvian, English, and in German. And I had all the recordings of his music, which was possible to get. And then was a also a moment when I was a big fan of what else? Shostakovich, yes. No, it's the same like a grandfather of Schnittke. And
there are some references to you made a piece of music that is called The Rite of Spring. Is it a tribute to Stravinsky in a sense?
No. It's just the same topic. I mean, the same spring fest or summer fest and some pantheistic topics. But Stravinsky, not. I really appreciate and I like Stravinsky, but I'm not sure he influenced me at that level. I have a really huge time I was listening only Mahler and only Wagner, because still it is my even though it's quite old fashioned, but still it's my goal or my ideal of instrumentation of orchestral sound. And it's not so far actually from also sometimes from some contemporary composers. Like one of my favorite composers always was Magnus Lindberg, which was also my teacher in one workshop, and I was really a big fan of his music, and still am. And he has this rich type of orchestration which I'm sometimes missing in contemporary music. This rich sound, rich deep timbres, and it's really nice. Yeah.
Not only in minimalistic approach, something.
In this really
because Gustav Mahler is about building some kind of cathedral in symphonies. I think this is what you are mentioning.
Yes, that's what I'm probably doing also in some of my works, but not always. You know, I'm getting a bit older, and my pieces are getting shorter. This is somehow.
But so far you have only, because you have published a lot of things, you have created a lot of things, but soon there will be your second symphony. according to what you say, you would be interesting in writing more music in this kind of form, this kind of why are is there a reason why you didn't write more symphonies? Is it because you want to achieve really a level that is high, or
in contemporary music always there used to be these words which are like a slang words, I think, and then symphony for really contemporary composers sometimes is like a slang. What symphony? It's so it's a name which belongs to, I don't know, the Mahler maybe was the last, or okay, Berio made a funeral for symphony with his symphony, but after this there. For these composers who wrote the symphonies, it sometimes sounded like he's composing symphony. Oh, in instinct in C major or in F minor. But I think I'm not shy about these names anymore, and I'm not shy about anything I'm doing anymore, and I'm not worrying about am I contemporary, I am not contemporary. It's not important for me anymore. And when I was really much younger, than in our circles, we was always had this lot about many things. Oh, he is old-fashioned. He made this song cycle songs or something like this. But the same with opera. I have two operas, and one of these operas is. Really kind of experimental, and it's made not in typical operatic form. It's more chamber opera with electronics and with no subject. And this was my walking against this genre of opera. And I was even writing an article at that time. What is opera and what is not? And still many said me, no, this is not the opera you wrote. This is something, but don't call it opera. And then I wrote a real opera, very classical opera, and it was 5 years ago. And my aim was just to understand for myself what opera means for me, what means this traditional kind of opera. And with symphony, I think it's the same way. I don't think that this word is very important. Is it symphony or is it not? I actually have many symphonic works with just the titles, which are not called symphonies. But in a principle, there are symphonies. In a form, in all this feeling. I just, I don't know. In one moment, I switched to this name, symphony. Let's do symphonies. Why not? And
I think it's also linked to some historical reason and context, because there is this big misunderstanding that starts with Shostakovich being in USSR and keeping writing symphonies, and in the West with the dodecaphonic movement, and wants to break the code. And then in the 90s, where there was absolutely key moments for you, there is this new freedom and the end of USSR. So it's like some kind of maybe a reaction, or I feel like, I don't know if you saw the movie Jelgava 94, but this is your version of Jelgava 94 in classical music, in a sense. Something like that. Inside your music, I think there are three patterns. I according to me, there is a big work of deconstruction. I would say, I would use this term, like in your piano piece that is called Octagon. There is a research, very deep research in dissonance, and based on microtonality. But I feel also that very often you try to build some layers of sound, very precise. Like, in some electronic music there are this drone movement, like Elian Redig or this kind of artist. So maybe I'm wrong, but I would like to have your reaction about these comments. Or
Yeah, that's. I think this dissonant thing is coming from my youth, and sometimes it is very. There are curious situations because myself, I'm not feeling that I'm so dissonant composer like others are hearing this.
Okay.
But basically, I think what I'm still keeping in my music. This is a kind of really sharp contrasts. Sharp contrast between different kinds of affects and different kinds of feelings, and they are symbolized by also by different methods of musical language. Like, for example, at my point of technique today, I'm working actually with a diatonic, with absolutely pure sounds, trying to make layers over this diatonic texture with some more dissonant sounds, and then back, and then trying to the different temperatures in music. But I'm not. I'm not often thinking about this theoretical side of my music, because I must say that I'm purely intuitive composer, and I'm absolutely relying on my intuition, and almost everything I'm doing from my intuition. And that's why sometimes I'm quite angry at these musicologists or critics which are writing that yes, he's structurally very well built music with the mathematical elements in it. I was, why? I've never composed any mathematical composition, and never used any formulas, and or sometimes maybe I used some more structural principles I'm using, but sometimes I'm even forgetting about them when I finish this composition. So this is just my tool which I'm using, and after it's not any more important for me. That's why sometimes I'm having trouble when I have to make analysis on my own works. So I'm sitting down and thinking, well, so what I used there? I don't remember. So I'm trying to go through it once more, and trying to find what was there. So I feel I see this process of composition as a huge meditation, actually, and what makes it interesting for me, and what is not interesting for me. What would be not interesting for me if I would know everything I will have in this composition from one end to another, like Schoenberg, for example. Yes, I have to go through all this principle. But I had in one workshop, there was one famous composer who told that it's a sign of non-professionality that you don't know what you'll do next. But for me, it's really interesting, and in the end, you still even see the logic of everything, and you can see that you made it in a very logical way.
I'm very worried about the quality of music if composers don't have a subconscious. You cannot analyze anything about yourself. On a more intuitive and emotional level, I have a feeling when I listen to your music that it's haunted by some ghost and darkness sometimes. It's I don't know if you agree with that, but on your website there are some comments by Peter Isvask who says that he found striking how tragic, even when you were young, your musical work could be. And,
yeah, I think it's a way of analytical approach to my own life, because of course you cannot blame your life, but my teenager years was quite hard, and I was growing alone actually with my sister. My parents died, and then I think it had some influence on my personality, and that's the questions which I'm trying to solve during my last years, actually having some psychoanalysis and so on. But and I'm understanding sometimes where the problems or some these musical ideas came from. And yes, I remember when the certain time in my life when all my music was full of kind of sadness. I must say, not darkness, but maybe sadness and nostalgia and a kind of melancholy. And I think I'm still very melancholic composer, even if somebody don't think so. But my inner feeling about my own music it's full of melancholy. But about the darkness, I think it's, who knows, maybe it's also a very subjective question, because I remember once I was in my former school, I was invited to talk about my own music for youngsters, and I prepared some very specially picked pieces, not to traumatize them, and to show something very light and very nice, which I composed during last years. And I remember there was one madrigal from madrigals by Cummings, which I composed for radio choir. It's so pure music. It's made, I think, only in a with this white keys on the piano, and then and the text is very light and full of lightness. And after this piece, actually it was not a student, it was a teacher and she asked me, "Is all your music so depressive?" then I had this, oh no, so what else? What else? Should I compose a pop song or what? I don't know.
Keep in mind that me and my spouse create this content on our own. This is a huge workload. To support us, use the PayPal link in the banner or go on paypal.me/VienaBalsi to help us continue this work. And now, enjoy watching. Well, Karel Mark Chichon on your... Yes. Explain that you are very involved in the creation of music and with the relationship with performers, and I would like to know a little more about this. If there is a reason linked to the technique of music, or is it more based on intuition?
I think a composer is nobody without a good performer, and you really need performer, even if you're not electronic music composer, and even then you have a festival or something, or concert where to play. But I'm lucky about musicians which I met in my life, and then which are fans of my music. And of course, not everybody is a fan of my music, but there are some. And between them are locally well-known artists, and there are even some internationally well-known artists. And I think the same. Who would be Schnittke without Gidon Kremer, for example? Mm-hmm. Who would be the same Cancelli without Gidon Kremer, or Georg Pellets, which is also I think he must be very thankful to Gidon Kremer that this is one very important performer who performed a lot of post-Soviet music and made the composers famous. And we can name many musicians like this. And if composers don't have good, fantastic performers, then what else? He's only on his writing desk with his symphonies and so on. But yes, Karel Mark-Shishon is a Spanish Gibraltar-born conductor who luckily came to Latvia and became a chief conductor for National Symphony Orchestra for some years. And actually these were one of the, I think, the most successful years for National Symphonic Orchestra, because he made this orchestra in a very high technical quality. And somehow it happened that when he first came, his idea was to make a composers competition for opening piece of the first season he's starting, and somehow I won this competition. And there was also a competition for ending piece of the next season, and I also won because of course it was his preference, and he was one of the persons who chose what he wants to play. And so it continued somehow, and then even after he left our orchestra, he's still playing 2 or 3 pieces of mine quite regularly with a good orchestras around Europe at least. And I'm trying to attend these concerts as if it's possible. And I was really happy that I can step on the stage of Berlin Philharmonic where he played my piece, or in Amsterdam in Concertgebouw and the same. And I was this is really fantastic. The same, I had a dream to compose for Gidon Kremer, and it was possible one day. And during last years, he performed a couple times my piece for violin and orchestra, so it's really good.
But for example, your string first string quatuor I was very impressed with the kind of sound you have here. Does it require something specific from the musician, some alternate tuning or something where you when you communicate with them you specify this?
Actually, my first string quartet is the motifs of this string quartet is used in 3 horror films actually. For the moment.
I have creepy taste.
No, I can agree that it's really extreme. It's really extreme in sound, and it's played by different quartets somehow, despite its level of temperature. but it yeah, it's a joke, but it demands a page turner for a quartet, and luckily in the last years it's possible to play with tablets, yes, and because it's no place where to turn page for musicians. I remember that one Polish quartet, which they were famous Polish quartets, was playing it, and these pages sheets was flying on the stage after each passage. So, but it's really impressive. But yeah, this string quartet is quite experimental work of mine. I must say, yeah, it's quite. I'm concentrating on one particular note. It's maybe later I discovered that maybe it's something similar to Giacinto Scelsi's approach, yeah, but yes. but in a more aggressive way probably. But yes, so I tried for myself. This was a kind of experiment. Where can I go in a deep of one sound and switching to another sound in the end? So it's the starting point is one sound and the end point is another sound. So how can I go from one to another in a most expressive way? And this meaning was this Trataka practice of meditation, when you are concentrating to one point. And you know, when you are not very used to meditation, then first your experience is that you are having a mind full of different thoughts, not connected, and even some aggressive and some you cannot stand it, and that's what's happening in this quartet. And in the end, there's you cannot hear in a recording, but in a score it's written that there must be at least 1 minute of silence after they played it, but not just sitting, but keeping a bows in the air. So this is the point of release, when you can go out of this.
I didn't find this piece of music terrifying. It's a research of energy, in my opinion. It's really raw, pure energy. You were mentioning your personal life, and sometimes I follow your Facebook, and all the composers have their guilty pleasures, but you seem to have some kind of healthy life with mushroom, with bikes, and doing bikes and running. So I don't know if you know this book by Haruki Murakami, which is about what I talk about when I talk about running. It describes the fact of writing, like, you know, sustaining some kind of rhythm. Is it this healthy life? Is it also helping for creating music? To have some lighter questions.
First of all, I'm trying to escape my unhealthy life, which I had for many years. Okay. So this is a logical continuation of my wish to live a longer life, because I did everything to be unhealthy for a long times, but yes, I must say I have this impatient feeling of myself, because I'm really impatient in some kind, and it's not enough for me that I see, for example, that yes, I will finish this symphony, for example, in 2 months, but it's too far for me. I should write every day. I should do it more and more and more and more, and then I'm finishing it a bit even earlier than it should be finished. Mm-hmm. The same with this healthy life, and for example, I'm going into extremities sometimes. The same with bike. I can do a small ride for 20 kilometers, but it's not enough for me. I'm doing it for 100 in one day, and I'm happy with this. And of course, next day I'm falling, I'm sleeping all day, but no, I need it for 100, and then I'm happy. I'm seeing this map I have in a Strava, and I'm, oh yes, I made it. You know, it's a kind of you got it, like a medal for this, and I really like this activity, and I must say that my brain is working better when I'm active. Than I'm always surprised about my some colleagues or just people who can sit down and start to think about things. I cannot do like this. I must be in a process, and then I'm thinking. This makes me to think and to make and the same cold water. It's fantastic. This feeling after swimming in winter. What's happening in your brain? It's empty. You're happy. You're smiling. Who didn't try to don't understand what I'm saying, but it's really it's different. It's.
I hope that this channel will be seen abroad, maybe by the Latvian diaspora who is living in Australia and Canada. This is a difficult question, and I don't know if you can answer in English, but how would you define what it is to be Latvian?
Sometimes, it was maybe years ago where was this discussion, for example, what is Latvian music? Mm-hmm. And there are some, I don't know, musicologists or some just who are thinking that Latvian music means that you are integrating some folk songs in it or folk melodies, or at least are not so dissonant. Yeah. But I don't think so. This was my idea at that time that you cannot write French or American or Spanish music if you're living here, eating or food, breathing or air here. You cannot even if you are copying somebody. But I think it's difficult to see it from inside. For example, when I'm listening to some Estonian composers, I feel, yes, there is something Estonian. There is something what connects these composers. Maybe it's some, I don't know, intonation world or some even harmonic choices they're making in their music. I spent a lot of time in Lithuania. Also there you can find something which connects some of these composers. Not everybody, but some. And you cannot define it. What is it exactly? And the same about music generally. You cannot very precisely say what is this there in this music. Is it music about, no, if the name is sun, then it must be sunny, yes, or it must be like something very, very precisely concrete. And to be Latvian, I don't know. I don't feel myself Latvian in a very traditionally. In a way which connects me with Latvian traditions in a very traditional also way. It's maybe it's not a good thing, but I'm not practicing folk song singing or although when I was in Lithuania I was participating in Lithuanian folk ensemble as a participant because I was invited by my friends, but still, I know this feeling when I'm spending a longer time somewhere else. I still have this longing to go home, go back, and I feel more. I think I feel more Latvian in a mental, in a geographic way. For example, I have my country side house, my cottage in a northeast part of Latvia. Actually, if somebody from Switzerland, I don't know, from Scotland will come there, so there's nothing there. There's just a flat field and some trees there and a small river, even not river, maybe something even smaller than river. But there's nothing really special. But I really feel connected with this place, and I cannot explain this why. It's something really emotional with these colors we have, this particular kind of green, this particular kind of gray, this particular kind of brown. Of course, the sky is the same all everywhere, but
not exactly.
Even or color of our sea. Of course, when I'm going to Mediterranean Sea or somewhere else, where this pure water color you can see through for many many meters, and we have this kind of brown yellowish water here, but still it's very close to me, and I don't say after returning, oh yeah, no, I will never again go to swim in this this color. But no, it's really very close to my heart here.
That's a great answer. Yes, yeah. Thank you very much for this interview. It was a pleasure to have you. If you enjoy watching this content, drop a like, subscribe. This is the only way to help the growth of this channel. Share on social network, and we hope to see you very, very soon.